Hi everyone, it's Jen again. Hope you had a good week. I've been working on some Arcane Dice Wars because, in my work with Arcane Dice Wars: A Villain Heart, I'm really kind of bogged down in this writing process. So I've just been wanting to sort of take a break from that and work on some art assets, and I had a lot of fun with these drawings, so I thought I would just share because it's a little bit more interesting than what I would have to show if I was just showing my writing. So, unless you find like really silly grammatical and spelling errors like riddled all over the place to be entertaining somehow. So, while my drawings are kind of like being roughly sketched here in the background, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my week because, I don't really have anything else to say. If anybody has any suggestions for like a video that they'd like me to talk about, then I'd be totally open to those types of suggestions. So this week, what's been on my mind a lot is just kind of the importance for me as an extreme introvert for me to kind of put myself out in public spaces. And in some ways, I think that like working in a public facing job is sort of like the perfect excuse that I need in order to like kind of share public spaces with people because as a sort of small and shy, I guess, individual, like I haven't had a lot of good experiences with just like approaching people in the wild. There's a lot of like kind of assumptions that can be made when I'm trying to like approach people, and this is not really like what I'm looking for. Like I'm not looking for deep and intimate types of relationships, whether that be romantic or otherwise. Like I think there's a lot of importance to just casual, like friendly interactions, like just sharing space with people and kind of like reaffirming that we have more in common as a human species than we do like as just individuals, and that like the bad interactions that we have with people are actually in the minority of cases. So those types of negative experiences tend to stand out in our minds because we are constantly trying to protect ourselves, and a lot of our psychology is kind of like based around like perceived fears and threats that are actually pretty objectively overstated. Like we tend to fixate on weird things than other actual statistically dangerous activities such as driving. We sort of really understate like the actual risk. So like we're we're sort of not always very good judges of these sorts of things, and I feel like with online media being so personal these days, parasocial these days, we tend to think that we know people who I guess go online and share all these very like specific and odd details about themselves that normally would not be expressed unless you knew somebody for years or they kind of are awkwardly oversharing with you. But normally your interactions with like everyday people, you wouldn't know these things about them. And we sort of get this feeling, or this, I think, in some ways, misconception that this means that we know something more about them than we do like your person on the street because they've shared this like secret facts about themselves. But really it's just a story that they're telling of their perception of themselves. And a lot of times, people don't even really know themselves all that well. Like we're complicated, and where our thoughts and actions come from are very complicated as well. So, we're not always the best like narrators of ourselves from an objective standpoint. So, I actually think that just sharing spaces with people is pretty underrated, and I didn't really come to even realize that until I started working at the library and started just sharing spaces with people, with regulars on a daily, weekly basis. And in hindsight, it makes perfect sense, right? Because like when I think about like my cats, and sharing spaces with them, it's like we're not talking and telling stories with each other. We're just existing in the same space, and somehow that prolonged exposure just creates like this unspoken bond between us. So I think that these types of, I guess, unspoken bonds, this kind of shared spaces and just shared humanity, was like a really important experience for me to have on a regular basis, just to reaffirm that, you know, we are all like human beings and we share more in common with each other than we don't, even if they have like completely opposite politics to mine, and they, you know, ideologically are completely the opposite end of the spectrum than I am. We still share more in common, way more in common than we don't. And I wouldn't be able to perceive that if I was just like going through their Facebook feed and like reading their blogs, you know what I mean? So yeah, so I know it's hard, and it's really weird how modern society has kind of created these very isolated experiences, with kind of like this artificial socializing that's just kind of really out of touch with like where our, you know, biological roots are. It is hard, and I feel like if I didn't work in again, a public front-facing job, then I wouldn't have like these regular communal like interactions. And I don't know what the answer is for like others, because working public front-facing jobs is usually pretty horrible, because of all kinds of other factors that don't have to really deal with working with the public. Like, we hear the horror stories of working with the public because, like, you know, we've all had like bad interactions with people, like having bad days, people having, you know, I guess traumatic responses to to being told no, or like not having things go their way, or whatever it is. I don't take that personally, even if they are acting purely out of like preconceived notions of like who I am, because I've had regular exposure to these people, and once we've just shared space with each other long enough, then those kind of like negative interactions just mellow out to like eventually becoming positive interactions. And it's not even just me like trying to win them over or like show them through like exceptional kindness that I'm not the horrible person that they think I am. It's just after being around me and just seeing that I am a competent person who is genuinely helpful, maybe not even to them, but maybe to other people, they just start to kind of like mellow out and realize, oh yeah, she's just like another person like me. And there's no reason for me to feel like this animosity towards her, right? So, and then I can feel the same way about them, like, oh, they're just, you know, doing their thing, and we don't even have to have a conversation about it. We just start to really, you just start to get used to people being people, and you realize that like whatever negative interaction you had with them is doesn't define who they are, and even the words coming out of their mouths, and them like trying to tell you who they are is not a complete story. You just can't really know who somebody is through that type of interaction. At least that's how I feel about it. So there is the, I guess the saying that I've heard of the advice of like, go out and touch grass. And yes, it is important to go out there and breathe some fresh air, and touching physical grass will never be replicated by virtual reality and kind of like colonizing Mars or something. Like, I think it's silly to try to create something that already exists. And so in some ways, like, I love social media spaces because It has been very difficult for me to find like-minded people in the places that I've lived, that I can just kind of like talk openly about a lot of my inner thoughts. But it is not a replacement for sharing spaces with people, for being a part of your community, and how we can do that when so much of modern life is designed to be anti-community, anti-solidarity, anti-shared spaces. I don't know. It's rough. Like, I don't have the answers. Trying my best to help cultivate that space where I work. But yeah, it's really difficult, and I don't envy young people these days. Like, it is an effort to try to create social environments for my own child throughout his entire childhood so far. So these sort of things used to exist organically, and somehow we've gotten to a place in society where it's has to be a constant effort to maintain what should be like normal biological behaviors. And I think that it creates a lot of unhappiness when you try to go against what is intrinsically, part of our nature, just hardwired into ourselves as social animals. So yeah, that's kind of where my thoughts have been, and I'm not always 100% happy or thrilled to be at work, I'll be honest, but I realize that my overall mental health has been incredibly improved since I started working in a public space. And it's not to say that working in every public space will give you that experience, because when I was working in retail, it was awful. And I worked in retail for many different places for many different years. So for whatever reason, I think a lot of it had to do with management and yeah, just a bunch of like corporate infrastructure. But I was able to be working in a public space in the library that the inner culture of it I could believe in, and it's been really good. And so I just want to say that I really feel for anybody out there who is feeling lonely. It is tough. It is very tough, and just don't give up on people, because we all have more in common than we don't. All right, take care, be kind to yourself and others, and don't forget to enjoy the process, and don't give up on humanity. All right, bye-bye.